Now, when I started, which was back in the days when I had black hair like my hat, Michigan sold tax lien certificates. And the starting bid was 50%. And so you could bid it down to the smallest portion of a piece of land, which is a vigitillion. You could bid it all the way down to that.
Have you ever wondered exactly what a reverse auction is? Well, want to know more? We've got Ted Thomas here, and Ted is the Tax Lien Certificate and Tax Deed Authority of America. Ted, we've got a lot of questions about this, so let's dive right in. And, to get started, can you just explain what is a reverse auction and how does it work?
Okay, well, reverse auctions are happening every single day across America. So let's just take your town anywhere USA, and your town is being run by a little small government, and that little small government takes care of the roads. It takes care of any number of things within the town. And then the county that you live in, they take care of everything from the schools. So they have to have someone do that. They take care of the police. They take care of the fire department. So let's say that the police department needs new cars this year. The county will simply do is they will send all of the car dealers within the county. We need new cars this year, and we want to buy 10. And the cheapest bidder will get the order. So instead of going out and trying to auction these cars off, what those companies simply do is they all send in their bid to the police department, and the lowest bidder gets it. So instead of it being a wild auction with everybody yelling and screaming, everybody send their bid in, and the lowest bidder get it. So it was a reverse auction. So when you go to a car dealer, that the car might cost nowadays $75,000. What if the dealer would sell it for $52,000, but another dealer would sell it for $55,000? Another dealer would sell it for $60,000. The lowest bidder gets it. So it's a reverse auction. So that simply is what a reverse auction is. And of course, governments have figured that same thing out. Well, when it comes to tax defaulted property, they have reverse auctions also. And we'll get into that before we finish today.
Well, Joseph is following up with a question. And can you give an example of a reverse auction when purchasing a tax lien certificate? Like, you're in the process, Ted. How exactly is it happening?
Okay, let's start out. Let's use Phoenix, Arizona. That's Maricopa County. And Maricopa County, it's a county of, say, 3 million people. They'll have anywhere from 20,000 to 50,000 tax lien certificates available. For years, I took classes of people there. So really good economy, they'll only have 20,000. Real bad economy, they'll have 30, 40, 50,000. All right, so a reverse auction would be the legislature determined that in Arizona, the tax lien certificate will pay 16%. Okay, they pushed that rule down to the Board of Supervisors. So the Board of Supervisors said, okay, we've got 30,000 tax lien certificates, and the starting bid is 16%. So you have to pay the tax and 16%. The next bid is 15.5. The one after that is 15. The one after that is 14.5. In other words, they're going to bid it down to the lowest bidder gets it. Does that make sense?
It makes sense to me. But let me ask this. Actually, it's not even my question, but what factors do buyers consider when competing in a reverse auction for tax lien certificates?
Well, what you want to do with tax lien certificates, it would matter where you are buying them. For example, let's go back to Phoenix again. The northeast side of Phoenix is Scottsdale. I can tell you, if you didn't know Scottsdale, it's golf courses, it's resorts, and it's expensive homes, $500,000 and up. Northwest Phoenix is more bread and butter, lots of $200,000, some small industries. South of Phoenix is industry. All right, so where would you have the least risk? Well, obviously, if a tax lien came up in Scottsdale, remember, if you buy a tax lien certificate and they don't pay you, you get the house. Well, you'd love to buy a tax lien certificate in Scottsdale, and then the people didn't pay it, so you got the house. As against buying a factory down here on the south end of town where the guy was working with sheet metal and oil, and it was all going in the ground. There's a big mess. It's industrial, and you get the point. So one is very low risk. One has a different type of risk. So you look at that. Then you want to look at how competitive is the bidding? Because the bidding is a down process with the lowest bidder getting the tax lien certificate. So there's two things you'd want to look at.
Well, that's a really good question, Christian, and thank you for sending that question in. Next one comes from Santa, and she says, I believe in Arizona, the bidding method for tax liens is reverse bidding. She's right about that. But what is the lowest a person can bid?
You can bid all the way down to 0.25%. But the way you would find out is if your state or county sells tax lien certificates, go to the rules for the county and read the auction rules. It'll tell you in all cases. But you could bid all the way down to 0.25%. I've seen even lower than that.
All right, but to answer this then, next question, what happens if there are multiple bidders offering the same lowest interest rate in a reverse auction for tax lien certificates?
You get multiple bidders and you're down at the bottom. They will either say the first person that bid gets it, or they have a computer in there, and they'll get the computer to give them a random choice, this guy or that guy. Okay, so a lot of times it ends up as a random choice. But let me explain this bidding process a little bit. Now, when I started, which is back in the days when I had black hair like my hat, okay, Michigan sold tax lien certificate, and the starting bid was 50%, and then you could bid it down to a portion of the property. And so you could bid it down to the smallest portion of a piece of land, which is a vigitillion. A vigitillion is like a grain of sand. You could bid it all the way down to that. That meant the property owner kept everything except the vigitillion. And so read the rules and you'll know a lot.
William is wondering something, Ted, and he's wondering, are there any risks or considerations that buyers should be aware of when participating in a reverse auction for tax lien certificates? I think you've covered some, but expand.
Okay, good. There's always rules. All right. So if you're going to worry about risk, the biggest risk that you have when you're buying a tax lien certificate is using your eyes to look at it, because thousands of people will raise their hand and buy the certificate and have never seen the property. I say, if you're going to buy a tax certificate, go see the property, because what if it's a beautiful property in a terrible neighborhood and then the people don't pay the tax? You're going to get that beautiful property in a bad neighborhood. What are you going to do with it? You might not be able to sell it. So you don't want to be in that. So that's a big risk. The other risk is that if you don't understand what you're doing and you keep bidding it down, do you want to bid down to 1 or 2%? Why would you bid down to 1 or 2%? You could put the money in the bank for 1 or 2%. So think about what you're doing. So you need to say, what's the lowest I'll bid? So generally speaking, people will go in Arizona, it's a 16% is the highest. A lot of people would automatically just walk up and say, I bid 8% and they get it. Or I bid 10% and get it. And some people will find a state that has sophisticated bidding methods. For example, I've got a guy that works for me, and he's a coach, and he's figured out a system of buying these certificates where if you buy the certificate and bid it down, but the people pay early, you get a reward. So there's all kinds of ways you can think this thing out.
Well, you know, Ted, these questions came in from all over social media. You got stuff from Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn. This one actually, last question, this comes from Diane, who was on Facebook. She asked, what happens if there are no bidders or there are no bids are placed in a reverse auction for a tax lien certificate?
Okay, well, if there's no bidders at the tax auction, the county will try to sell it at a subsequent sale. If there's no sale at the subsequent, in other words, no bidder, if they don't sell it then, they'll put it on what they're going to call, there'll be different names for this. They're going to take it and they're going to put it on a separate list. Now, let's just call the separate list the over-the-counter list. There's a lot of different names for it, but they basically take it off the default list and they put it over here on the separate list, and anybody can go buy over-the-counter. You could walk into the county office and say, all right, I've looked up this property number, I want to pay the tax. And you could pay it and you would earn 18%. So some people wait until the auction's over and just buy certificates so they can get 16 or 18% or whatever.
Well, before we leave, I want to remind everybody that you have another question for Ted about anything having to do with this stuff. Just leave in the comments below.
All right, so you folks that are new to this, there's a challenge in that we're in a business that's abundant. By that I mean There's 3,000 counties. All 3,000 counties have a challenge. The challenge is they either have to sell a tax lien certificate and get some money in, or they have to sell a tax deed. Well, how are you going to keep track of 3,000 counties? You can get the newspapers. You can go to the websites. So what we did is we created, it's something that you can use and go state to state, find out when the auction is, how many properties they have, or how many tax lien certificates they have. You can find that out. And if you want to, you can ultimately get into the county records and go in there and research those properties, which you should always do when you go to a tax audit. So it's right below me, and they'll see a demo of it there.
That's great. Click on the link right in the description, guys, and take advantage of it. Thanks for watching.